debating, interviewing. You know that's what they doing. Stick around. It's about to get all Ruby up in here. Remote Ruby starts now.
Hello, sir.
Hey, it's been a long time. No Andrew this week, though. He's out in the middle of the Grand Canyon as we speak. Is that right?
Yeah. I'm going to look at his location. It hasn't updated in 24 hours. So normally, I'm glad he told us he's going hiking because normally I'd be concerned. But
yeah. Oh, man.
Yeah, he's
either that is, you know,
last seen by a lodge. So
I was going to say last seen at that Popeyes near his house.
Doing donuts. There's an Amtrak station near there as well. Amtrak being the trains here in the U.S. Andrew
I forget that that's the slow trains here in the U.S.
Slow train, yeah.
We don't have fast trains.
No, somebody wrote a review of a new updated train route from Chicago going north. That must be really interesting. It must be a fresh take on trains and stuff. It was no, it's still the same old Amtrak trains. It's just a new route.
Colin and I are talking about taking the train up from St. Louis to RubyConf in November. I think that'll be fun.
That's cool. Is he going to take the train from New Orleans to St. Louis?
We didn't discuss that, but that might not be a bad idea too. It's crazy how cheap it is. It's $25 from here to Chicago.
So that's crazy.
That might also be a round trip. I can't remember.
The New Orleans route goes New Orleans. It's called the Spirit of St. Louis, I think. And it goes New Orleans through Memphis to St. Louis.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the only reason I know about it. Because I want to take it to New Orleans, but it's longer than driving.
Yeah, I know. I'm hoping that we get the correct one because there's one that goes from St. Louis to Chicago as mostly direct, but we didn't do that last time. And I swear we stopped in every little small town along the way and it took 8 hours. It was longer, I think, than driving because you had all those little stops.
Went through Washington, D.C.
St. Louis to D.C. to Chicago.
Let me see here. Let me look at this. This is important. This is what the people care about.
Yeah, I know.
5 minutes of nothing.
I'm glad that we really bring the people what they want.
I know. Oh, well, I looked this up, which I'll talk about last week while Andrew and I were out.
We recapped Railsconf with Kent and Colin. It was a good time. We had a lot of fun. I think Ufuk and Andy and the whole committee for Railsconf nailed it this year. By far the best one I've been to in a long, long time. And they addressed every one of our complaints that we had discussed in the past of things we wish improved or whatever. The only single downside that we had noticed, and I was lucky this time, but the lunch buffets, they went vegetarian heavy. So there was only one meat line and the line for that was insanely long and all the vegetarian ones were short, but there was 3 more vegetarian ones and 1 meat line. So it was kind of funny, but luckily I was there 20 minutes before lunch started. And then we're just I guess we'll just keep chatting and stand right next to the plates and wait for them to let us go.
Yeah.
And sure enough, a minute later, they were like, all right, you can go. We were like, cool. So unlike Rails World, where I did not eat for 2 days.
Proud of you.
I ate good there. So
Proud of you.
We got to stay in the GM Evil Lair building. It was pretty sweet. It had this one giant tower in the middle, and then on the 4 corners, 4 other towers or whatever. It looked like an Evil Lair. It was cool. And then Kent could wave across the river to Canada. So yeah, if you ever needed to escape real fast, just a little short swim away.
I wanted to rent a car while we were in Vermont and go to Montreal and go to the casino, but everyone with me, with the exception of Andrew, who would have gone, would have already traveled into the US from outside of the US. And I was like, I feel like that might be risky, taking you outside of the US and then back in a SUV.
Especially in the trunk. They do raise some questions,
Yeah, just hiding in there. Shh, we're pulling up. What was the vibe like when they announced that there's only one more Railsconf?
Compared to the previous year where they ended with kind of a rough note like that, this was actually really good because you could talk about it instead of ending the conference on a sad note like that. And then just everybody goes home depressed. It started out as, oh, that's sad.
Out depressed.
Well, yes, but it was like, okay, we're definitely going next year. And the conversation just felt a little sad. Immediately afterward, it was, ooh, I wonder where they're going to have it. I have to go to this very last one and whatever. So I felt like it created room for the conversation about Drew Bragg trying to convince desperately Adarsh that it needs to be in Philly.
Oklahoma.
In Philadelphia, Oklahoma. Sucks that it's the end of that, but it's also time to change things up. Things have run for a long, long time, and usually, no matter what, there's got to be change at some point. And so it's time for that. So I think people were generally pretty supportive of that, which I thought was good. So
I think it's good. I think it stops the question of which one do I have to choose between to go to.
Yeah. And the one thing we did think about as part of that discussion was there's only 1,000 tickets or whatever for Rails World. What do you do for all the people who couldn't get a ticket? And they no longer have a conference that's focused on Rails. But I said, go to RubyConf. I hope to see RubyConf be 600 people, and it should grow as the alternative. You can still talk about Rails at RubyConf. There's no reason not to, but there's also a lot more interesting focus around, yet Rails happens to be a Ruby library, but also the Ruby LSP, the Prism stuff, all this other things that make Rails as good as it is discussed there as well. I'm hoping that RubyConf thrives some more. And I know they just are like, we're always organizing a conference. Even before Railsconf is over, we got to figure out RubyConf, and all of that is just never ending and stuff. So that's my hope. We get more Blue Ridge Ruby, Rocky Mountain Ruby, lots more of the smaller ones, Madison Ruby. And then they're not small either. They're 200 people. For Madison Ruby, I think they're shooting for that or more, which is awesome. So they're not that small. That 200 people, I think, was what RubyConf Australia was in Sydney in April. So I think what we'll hopefully see is that we'll have more conferences of a decent size, and we will convince you to do Southeast Ruby again, and
keep working.
We'll hang out in Memphis. I really would love to do one in St. Louis sometime, but it's just so much work. I'm already way too busy, and I would need all the support I could get, but I can't imagine.
It's a tremendous amount of work. I was sitting here a couple of days ago, like we've had our oldest son breaking his arm. I can't sleep. I had to go to the ER while I was in.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I had a bad reaction to some medicine they gave me to help me sleep. It's for a restless leg. It's not anything crazy, but I was so dizzy the last night of the retreat. Andrew and Harry, I texted them. I was like, I need you to come to the hospital and help me.
Dang, dude.
But between all of that, I was sitting at my house thinking the other night, because Blue Ridge is happening next week. And I was literally thinking, because Jeremy had floated the idea, what if we like alternated Blue Ridge, Southeast, something like that? It's actually really cool. The people involved with Blue Ridge were like, no, we don't want to like skip a year. Like we want to keep doing it.
Oh, that's great.
That's cool that they have that energy. But I was also sitting here thinking, if we had done that this year, my life would be even worse right now. It's just so much work to do that. So
yeah, I can't really imagine trying to do that on top of everything else unless I had a team that was doing all of the work and I was just trying to rally people to come to St. Louis or something. Yeah, it seems amazing that they have that energy that they're going to do this.
It's awesome.
Every year. We need more of that. And
I think it's
mad
cool.
Respect to everybody doing that, because it is a ton of work.
It's a ton of work. I also like Blue Ridge. I was looking at their lineup, and there's just several like faces and people I just did not know, and I just think that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's another thing those conferences are so good for, is giving people opportunities to speak without having to necessarily like your first time be at Rails World or RubyConf. I want to go to Blue Ridge. I can't go this year, but
I'm in the same boat. Yeah. I was really hoping to, and it's not that far away. And it was another excuse to drive my car through the windy mountain roads and stuff. But yeah, between Australia, Detroit, Brighton Ruby is about a month away, trying to squeeze that in between. And then knowing that I'll be going to RubyConf and Rails World later this year, it was just, I can't do another one. But
Yeah.
it's exciting because when I got into Ruby, I went to Midwest Ruby in Kansas City for a couple years, met some people that became really good friends just from being there for 2 days or whatever. Long lifetime friends from that. And then we would drive around whatever other, I forget some of the names. So there was a free conference for a day that we drove down to once, and just a whole bunch of the little ones. Ruby on Ales, and there may be 100 people. And those are just very fun time because it was lots of small groups. And part of the real trouble with a conference of even Railsconf size, which was, I think, 600 or so this year, you can't talk to everybody. I kept seeing Robbie Russell around, but never had time to go stop and chat like I wanted to. Just same thing with tons of people and people who would catch me and, hey, I wanted to say hi, but you were busy earlier. And I was like, you just got to interrupt, because that's what happens when the conference is several hundred people or a couple thousand like it's been in the past. And that becomes overwhelmingly big because you definitely cannot talk to everybody. And I feel like I gravitate a lot more to spending time with my friends when it's 2,000 people versus when it's smaller and it's 100 people. I'll go talk to as many people as I can, especially the people I don't know.
Kind of have to. Well, it's interesting this year, actually, Jason started the conference by sorting people into groups on the screen. And so here in group is 1 through 12 or something, may have even gone higher. There were no designated areas. You just had to go like find these people. And so people were like raising their hands, like, you know, what number? And like, it was chaos, but it was cool because he did it twice and it forced you to talk to at least 7 people you didn't know.
Yeah.
It was cool.
That's really cool. I did for the first time, and Colin's done it a couple times, the Scholars and Guides program, and cannot say enough good things about it. It's just welcoming somebody into a group of 600 strangers and trying to make sure they have a great time. And that is, from experience going to conferences and not knowing anyone at all, it's awkward conversations the whole time. And then the next conference, you're like, oh, hey, I remember chatting with you last time or whatever. And it starts to become easier and easier, but you might be afraid of going up and saying hi to Tenderlove or Speaker or something. But when you're like there with a guide who already knows a bunch of people, one of my favorite times is going to Railsconf with you. I forget when it was, but everybody knew you. And I was just tagging along behind you pretty much. And I was like, this is wild. And I got to meet a bunch of people. I forget when that was, but I remember very fondly, everybody knows Jason. This is crazy. And no one knows who I am. But then I got to meet everybody through you or whatever. That, I think, is something every conference should do. Welcome people. You could volunteer for it or whatever. You don't have to give away free tickets and all that Railsconf does. Or Ruby Central, I should say, because they do that also for RubyConf. Just that whole thing of partnering people up who are strangers and making sure everybody has a good time and doesn't feel out of place or awkward or whatever. It's great.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned Robbie Russell. Have you done the Rails survey yet?
No, I keep forgetting about it, but I need to.
It goes until August.
Oh, it's
Robbie,
open for a long time then.
Yeah, it's open all summer. I didn't realize it was open that long. Robbie actually reached out. And so I'm going to use this moment to share a few words about the survey.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to say. Hey, Rails developers, it's that time again. Planet Argon's, I don't know that word. Biennial?
Biannual?
It's BIENNIAL. All right, we're going to drop an edit.
I thought it was biannual.
I'm not going to show myself like this.
But then it becomes one of those terms like bi-monthly. Is every other month or twice a month?
Twice a month.
God knows.
God knows. All right. It goes something along the lines of, hey, Rails developers, it's that time again. Planet Argon's every 2 year survey. Ooh, no, that doesn't work.
Don't they do it every year?
They do it every other year.
Really? It's not every year?
No.
Oh.
Something along the lines of, hey, Rails developers, it's that time again. Planet Argon's survey of the Ruby on Rails developer community is now open. They've been surveying the community since 2009 and published all the results for us to learn more about our tooling, versioning, educational resources, and so much more. You can browse past results and participate this year by visiting railsdeveloper.com/survey. And I promise that wasn't a pre-written message that Robbie shared with me.
You're just so articulate. That is what you are.
That's what we work on here in Memphis, being the best at talking.
Sounds like it. Everybody should take that survey. It's very important to kind of get people a pulse on Rails and what's changing and what's new and what's going on and all of that good stuff. So it's important. And it's much more accurate than the sort of, oh, well, Stack Overflow doesn't have a lot of Rails postings, which means that Rails is definitely dead. That stuff is never accurate or anything. So these are the ones to look at or whatever. So, yep. How has
time to do it?
I know, because it's a pretty long survey.
Sorry,
I'm looking at the size of the scroll bar and I'm like, this is going to take a minute. You guys have been out in your company retreat. How's product stuff been? I think you guys have released some new stuff at Podia recently, haven't you? If I remember right.
We released a blogging feature and then...
I saw the blog. You guys watched that. There's a guy, I think his name was David Heinemeier Hansen, a while back posted a video about a blog.
I've seen
like some
that.
software.
We were inspired by that. It only took us 15 minutes. We shipped that feature.
It's pretty nice.
And there's been a lot of stuff. Andrew just released, we have a Discord integration now. So when people buy products, you can
I saw that.
enroll them. Yeah, Andrew worked on that. Andrew and Diogo.
Cool.
I've been in a code factory with
Java Land.
Yes. So we've been building factories and builders. I'm going to say something that's going to contradict all other 200 and whatever episodes.
We need a bleep button just for the fun of it.
We do need that. STI didn't scale very well in one part of our code base, and I'm scared to say that out loud.
I think that seems like a common kind of...
Don't you dare slander STI.
I like it, but it makes sense too, though. Like someone said from GitLab that they had notifications using STI for the different types, and that table just becomes a freaking massive table. And so at some point they break it out into their own separate tables for different types of notifications, which makes sense. But it's also the size, the scale of problems that, you're going to have to build unique stuff at a certain scale. No matter what you do at a small scale, it all generally works pretty fine. But you'll run into those bottlenecks, which part of building software, I think, doesn't make STI bad.
Yeah, it's worked for so many years, but we have some things on the roadmap we want to do that require us. They don't require, but if we want to do them well, we need to kind of untangle this a bit. So we're switching some stuff over to delegated types.
Yeah.
And it's
which
only
that's what I was going to ask you is if you move it to delegated types, it's effectively the same conceptual thing, but it's polymorphic join table. You're just kind of moving it up a level of abstraction almost, or moving it out, extracting it.
That's exactly what we're doing. So basically, I guess we can talk about this. We have this model that represents a course, and then every product type we've added since then has inherited from that as like STI. But that means course is a source of truth. Course isn't the only thing we sell at Podia anymore. And so like, it's a bad representation. At a minimum, the naming is incorrect. At most, it doesn't represent that. And so like when you buy a webinar, you're not buying a course, you're buying access to an event, stuff like that. And so we're untangling some of that. And the abstraction really here is like everything is a product, right? And so, but before that, digital downloads in our system used to be called products. For the past 5 years, I've been naming things product, knowing that we're moving to like this one day. But I had to go undo all of that for 5 years because we needed to clear up the word product to make it clear what a product is. And we're running them side by side right now. And so, it's been wild, but it's worth it. It's just a lot of work.
Yeah. You're rebuilding the plane mid-flight.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's definitely tough because it's one of those technical debt things you knew about 5 years ago. And it's hard to keep the pace of new development and features and growth of the business. And then we'll kick this can down the road a bit, but we'll try our best to keep it in mind as we're working. And then at some point it comes to, we need to do the hard stuff now and clean it up. In a similar vein, that's what Colin's been on with cleaning up my old. I never really planned GoRails to be sold to teams. So
I saw that announcement. Then I saw you thank Colin, and I thought, yeah, that all checks out. So.
Yo, quick question for you. Do you want higher clarity into production but don't have the time to become a wizard in observability? Honeybadger Insights is exactly what you need. Forget the old school trio of logs, metrics, and traces. We're talking structured events that don't just sit there. They're your treasure map to solving mysteries in your app. With Honeybadger, sling your logs and events into the mix and voila, you just unlock the power of Honeybadger's new query language, BadgerQL. It's like having a conversation with your data. Ask it anything. Turn mishaps into metrics and showcase your wins on dashboards that even the marketing team will drool over. And guess what? This isn't just for big spenders. Honeybadger's got you covered with a free plan that packs a punch, including error tracking, uptime monitoring, sleek status pages, and more. Oh, and speaking of errors, Honeybadger treats them like VIPs at the club. With Insights and BadgerQL, your errors aren't just problems, they're opportunities. Explore your data in ways you didn't think were possible and get the insights that you deserve. Check out honeybadger.io. That's right, honeybadger.io.
In the very beginning of GoRails, we start adding teams because somebody requests it. I don't really want to go build a bunch of stuff for teams that may not ever be used. But I could hack together a user belongs to another user, and we check the current user's subscription, or if they happen to belong to another user, check that person for a subscription. Simple as that. And we just assign literally just one new column and then one extra check to see if you're subscribed or not. Not a big deal at all. So that's survived for over 10 years or whatever, which is great. But we were at the point where we're like, the team's plans are sold in blocks of 5s. So you have a team of 3 or a team of 8 and whatever, you're either overpaying or underpaying and you can't get exactly what you need on your team or whatever. So we've been talking about, let's just go make that change and make it using Stripe's quantity option for the line items. So we'll just put, you pay for 5 or 10 or 8 or 7 or 3 or whatever the number is, and it just multiplies it. You then have those seats to assign. And we already kind of had the assignment of seats because the plans would keep track of how many users were allowed. So then we're just looking at a different place for the quantity now instead of the thing in our database for the users allowed. And that worked out pretty well. And then we were like, you should ideally be able to remove somebody, uncheck them, and then automatically update the quantity and the pricing because they don't have pro access anymore. That sounds simple, but then if it gets changed in Stripe, then we got to make sure that's updated. And then there's other situations where you're checking out and you pay for 8, but then you're the only person on the team so far and you need to invite the other people. So a webhook might come in, you paid for 8, webhook from Stripe comes in, we recalculate and see that you only have 1 person. So then we drop it back down to 1. And the complexity of that is where he was able to like get a good chunk of that in there. And then we start reviewing the code at some point. And I'm thinking about edge cases and I'm like, ideally this seems like a good plan, but we can tell that it's becoming harder and harder to think of all the edge cases. And so we ended up just screw that. We'll just make it easy for you to adjust and click save and update the quantity on your subscription, change it to exactly what you want. And it's manual. It's basically the same amount of work as the user, but you know exactly what you're going to get all the time. And our code can be 100 times simpler. But it was definitely one of those, here's a bunch of technical debt built up that we need to clean up. Because we had also built a little one-off prices for different people that we had done in the past because we didn't really have a promo code thing. because that wasn't really part of the card element in Stripe. And also we had used Braintree for PayPal, and we pretty much hidden all the PayPal stuff. We're not accepting new PayPal customers. You can pay through any of the crazy amount of payment methods on Stripe. So that didn't support promo codes. So we'd have to build something custom and then do all that with the 2 APIs. And we didn't want to do that. So now we've got the promo codes and we can just use that. And it's way easier. Like we had a thing with Women Who Code. So we gave them a discount, which sadly they shut down, which is real sad. But if anybody comes to us and needs a parity discount or whatever through, because they live in Brazil or whatever, hit us up over email. We'll give you a promo code, and it's way simpler now. Instead of we link you to a special plan and whatever. So now we can condense all of our plans into just one thing and do the quantity based stuff, and life is much simpler. But it was funny,
that complexity.
Yeah. And it was funny too, because we're in the middle of it and we're like debating some of these options. And if we couldn't migrate those team plans over to quantities, then it was going to be like, well, crap, we have to maintain both now, which is we have a better, cleaner version, but the same problem as writing Rails or libraries. You were stuck with the legacy code until the next major release, where you can, after it's been deprecated, you can actually finally remove it. In products, you're hoping to be able to remove that cruft immediately. No, if we're going to get in a situation where we're going to have to keep around the old cruft and the new stuff, we need to reevaluate. Yeah, because then this isn't going to help at all. So luckily we got through that, but it was one of those moments where you're like, as a developer writing the product, last thing we want is to have to keep around the legacy stuff, which I think is probably why you see a lot of companies cutting their old grandfathered things. At a certain point, they try to keep it as long as they can, but that cruft that they're trying to get rid of internally, which always sucks because it's usually comes with sorry, we're getting rid of that plan and we got to raise prices on you and whatever else. User Voice was what I used to use because they had a free customer support plan or something 10 years ago. They just emailed me. They're no longer going to offer the free plan. It will be $39 a month if I put my card in, and that is a 96% discount of their current pricing of whatever. And I was like, I need to go find their pricing page because what the hell is going on here? So we haven't used them for a long time, but we're still, I guess, getting the emails about it. But $39 a month, that sucks. We were used to a free plan because we didn't use it much or whatever. But I understand sort of the need to maybe get rid of that at a certain point. And then this is a 96% discount, caught me off guard. And I was, what the heck are they charging for this now?
Excuse me?
Yeah. So it's like $1,000 a month now that they're, I guess, going B2B up market or whatever and focusing on that. But I was like, dang, dude. Yeah. So that was quite the surprise to read.
Oh, okay. Real quick before I share this other thought. With the STI to delegated type conversation, with the conversation you just had about moving your subscription stuff around, I can't speak for you, but I still feel like in both of our situations, it was the right call back then because you don't know if it's going to scale, right? You don't know.
Yeah, I don't regret it at all. I guess even then, Podia wasn't always Podia. Podia was Coach before that, was not selling the same stuff.
Software. It was for LSAT tutors. And yeah, so I guess that's the interesting thing. Like hindsight's 2020. If delegated types would have existed then, and B, if we would have come out of the gate with that, we'd have gotten it wrong.
I always point this out to people too, that delegated types did exist then, but you just had to set up your own model with the double polymorphic association.
Yeah.
Basically. No one actually really recognized you could do that or thought about it because it wasn't a common pattern. It's so helpful now that it has a name so you can actually talk about it and discuss it. And everybody's kind of on the same page with it now. But you could have done that before, but you probably wouldn't have thought about that. So.
And it's not a silver bullet. There's been a couple of times where I'm like, is this better than STI? I don't have specific examples right now because I've been off that project for 2 weeks. But
so for anybody that's not really familiar, like STI on a basic level is everything's in the same table, a products table. Maybe not the best example. I always like looking at Basecamp, and you have a project with events that happen, and everything would have to be like the same database table for the basic storage of things. And then when you pull one of those records out, it can tell that it's a message board post or a to-do item or something. But you would weirdly have to shove them all in the same table in order to do that. And then delegated types is like, what if we have an events table for a project and it references a bunch of other tables? So you actually have a separate message board table with all of those posts in it. And events just connects that between the project and the message board. So you have sort of the separation between those. So you can actually organize things and separate them out, because technically for Podia, for example, a course is very different than a digital download and a webinar and a blog or whatever that you've got in there. Those are all very different types, need to store very different data. And STI is really designed for, they're all the same thing at a base level and like have smaller variation between them.
We use STI for our page sections on our sites.
That makes sense because the sections are all roughly similar.
It makes sense until it doesn't. Pretty much for me, it feels like a smell when I need to add a column. Will this column apply to everything? And if not, okay. To be fair too, we get around that a lot because we use JSON-B content column. Some things will have some text content that others won't. And it works really well for that. But I'm not going to do any type. I don't think I'm going to do any type of relationship in JSON-B because that's not what it's designed for.
Right. That one's a good example where it's right at the very edge of maybe not a good fit for STI, because if you start, this section has text, this section has an embedded video, and the video is in a library that can be reused multiple places. You end up starting to break up the data for each of those is quite independent at a certain point, but using the JSON stuff helps you keep them similar. That's why for Notice, STI makes a lot of sense, because a notification generally has one record it's related to that spawned, like a comment spawned a notification. And then we might provide extra context in there of what the action was, the comment or the pull request was reviewed, or whatever the action might be. And all that makes sense to just shove in a JSON-B thing. You're typically not going to be querying on it. But also when the comment or pull request is deleted, we can use a regular has many notifications to dependent destroy without going through. In the past, we had done that through the JSON-B, which meant you had to build your own custom destroy callback in order to make sure the notifications were queried against the JSON-B data to find here's the notifications that reference this object. So that when you start recreating things that are in active record, then you're definitely pushing the boundaries on it. It does work out pretty well, but I could see a future version of Noticed having maybe delegated types and STI or something where it's you're creating the notification records themselves, which is the main thing, but then they could point to like another table for extra data or something, and that could even be STI itself or whatever. There's probably some cool, crazy ways of implementing it, but I think that's a good way that you're pointing out. Sort of, it's a blurry boundary of where STI is not the right call, but it can be very hard to notice that until it's too late or something.
It's too late. Again, made the right call when we did it. Still stand by it. It's interesting.
So I talked to somebody this morning, similar conversation. Basically, he's got an app that has integrations to these services. He's building the very first version of the app, and it's got 5 different types of integrations. So similar to like Hatchbox, we have integrations to hosting providers for creating servers, for creating managed databases, and then Git providers. And those are 3 separate types of integrations. So the way that the code is being written currently, he was a little concerned with, because each integration is directly implemented as opposed to building an abstraction layer over that, which is here's the actions we need in order to, for example, with Hatchbox, to create a server, On DigitalOcean, I can just create the server. But on AWS, I might need to create a VPC and a subnet and choose that before I can create the server. So we can just have the set of every service that we do for hosting can have the create VPC step and then the create server. And maybe some of those haven't just an empty step for creating the VPC because we'll use the default or they don't have VPCs. So we effectively have a null operation there and just skip that step for those. And I was telling him, you probably want to do this because it's the same issue of coming back and adding team support later on or doing anything where you program it for one thing, but in the future, it might be a loop of things and multiple things you have to deal with. If you have to go and change all of your code that goes through and assumes there's only one to now there's potentially 6 or any number, you have to change it from a current user.project to current user.projects.find, and we have to have the ID, and it becomes a nightmare to kind of think about it that way later on and refactor that. And I was telling him, you should probably have them go back, build the abstraction for these types of services. We need these general operations. The details of how they actually need to work with Hetzner versus DigitalOcean versus AWS, we don't care at this level. We just want to say, hey, create a VPC, create a server, delete a server. And we want to plan for that today so that it may not be perfect what we envision right now, but we'll figure it out as we get into the details. But at least we can have some foresight into where are we headed so that we don't code ourselves into a corner and then have a really hard time refactoring. I've been there, done that. And then I've written things in Jumpstart that are thinking about that ahead of time. And then you're like, holy crap. There are those moments where you're like, we still didn't envision all the issues that we would run into.
It just got worse.
But there are times where you're like, I can't believe how easy this was. This took 5 minutes and I thought it was going to take 2 months. So those are the hopeful goals you can plan for or whatever, but you don't necessarily know. There may be some weird things, but I feel like putting some thought into it ahead of time can really save your butt in the long term, right in the butt.
It can.
If anybody saw that Wheel of Fortune thing.
Oh, God. The problem for me is I go the other direction where I try and solve it ahead of time and then it never pans out. I never encounter the problem. And so it's a balance.
It is, yeah. Because in this case, he knows he's going to have many of these, but they only wanted to code it for the one at the beginning.
When you know ahead of time,
you should definitely do that. This is also the hard part of building Jumpstart is the same thing as building libraries and knowing that, okay, I'm trying to write an admin interface that could be used in any situation for any application, for any database, for any thing. And it's impossible to build because you cannot even remotely imagine the use cases that you will have. Those become really worthless things to try to solve because you got to set some constraints so you can even start. It's definitely a balance trying to figure that stuff out.
Before we wrap, you're talking about subscriptions. It's the other thing. We changed Jobboardly to one-time payment. It's a bit of an experiment, but an experiment that's going quite well. We'll see how it pans out long term, but holy shit. I still have to support subscriptions because we didn't move people on subscriptions off, but the code is when subscriptions, if and when they're gone, holy shit, I forgot how much fun it is to write applications that don't have any type of recurring subscriptions.
Yeah, that's super cool, dude. The 247 forever. You inspired by once on this one at all?
We talked about it a little bit. We ran a couple of lifetime deals before we launched, kind of targeted, and we had pretty good success with minimal effort, pretty qualified, the people reach out to. But yeah,
so cool.
We'll see how it pans out. Keep doing the math. I think it works. It's weird.
It doesn't preclude you from the one power user who's, I got 100,000 jobs and I need some extra features and whatever. And I paid $249 for this. That person or whoever the crazy power users are will be willing to hey, can we hire you? do a subscription so that we can just have you on hand, keep this up and running for us or whatever else.
Right.
I think in the long term, we will probably see a lot of businesses doing one-time payments, subscriptions for the people who make sense to have them, and then also like a consulting wing. You could imagine Hatchbox in a similar vein of you could pay $100 or whatever it is for maybe one server lifetime. Maybe we just do that and it's your side project server, whatever. We'll just make it easy for you to buy. It would be cool, right? You're not going to be deploying a ton of that. If it goes down, it's not that big of a deal or whatever because it's side projects and whatever. But then the people who are like, we have production stuff and we want to make sure that we are going to be able to upgrade to the new Ubuntu LTS version and run the latest Ruby right away and all that stuff. They are a bit more demanding. They need the constant updates and whatever else because they are staying up to date. And then there are also the power users who are like, hey, can you help us optimize our app for this configuration, whatever else? There are those customers who would happily pay you $10,000 a month to have your expertise and really optimize that. And I feel like there's probably going to be that as sort of a great, complicated, I guess, having the three different sort of business models. But in theory, you can be profitable as a company very quickly rather than we only sell subscriptions and it's going to take us 5 or 10 years to be ramen profitable or something because you just don't have, people are afraid of commitments on subscription. And if it's for side projects, I don't really care if I just charge you $100 and then you don't have to worry about it. I don't have to worry about it. We agree that that's the relationship, that it is a low priority relationship.
It's a handshake agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing that kind of changed my mind on it. It was Kyle's idea.
You worry about
cost every month. Yeah. And then I did the math a few times. And then what I thought about those, when I started working on job board with you, my whole thought was there's a lot of job board softwares, but they're mostly targeted toward power users and where it's the software for people who want to get started. But the problem too with people that want to get started is it takes a while to get it going. If they don't see something 2-3 months in, or they're not as amped about it anymore, they'll churn out. And so hopefully with this, it's a little bit more upfront commitment, but you can ride it out longer. Once you've done it, in theory, it could be done. And then if it takes you a year, 6 months, whatever, 2 years, you can be more successful.
It's kind of the difference on you buy a course versus you subscribe to Go Rails. It's a bit more commitment that you're signing up for mentally. You pay for the course one time. You may never go through the course, but it's there if you want to or whatever.
Right. It's on you.
Yeah. The subscription feels like a continuous sort of nagging of, hey, are you using this?
Right.
It's got its pros and cons as well because it's cheaper in the moment or whatever. And if you're subscribing for 3 months, it's way cheaper than buying a course for $250 or whatever. So, or it's great for the business owner to have the people who are we're just committed to support you forever. And that helps make it less scary as the business owner because it's, we can rely on having a salary. I know that I will be able to pay Kent and Colin to continue doing support and making content and solving my own old technical debt. I think it's going to be interesting to see that as more entrepreneurs are probably going to end up with 3 business models because at the end of the day, you have some customers that would probably happily pay you a whole crap load of money and other customers who just, I'm dabbling and I can't afford a lot. If you only have one price, you cannot accommodate those 2 types of people. And that may be a good thing. You hear Jason and David talk about that with Basecamp. No one can pay us more than whatever, $2.99 a month or whatever it is. So we can't have Amazon come in and be like, we're going to give you $1 million a month and we're going to use Basecamp. And then they start leveraging their thing and we might cancel. If you don't build these features, then they're not on the hook as a business that is make or break dependent on this one customer. And these are things you figure out over time too. You can adjust and see, but at the beginning, try it, experiment. We did Jumpstart as a one-time purchase for a long time. And then we realized so many people want us to keep it up to date. The only thing that really makes sense is for us to have a subscription. So if we're not updating to Rails 7.2 and Rails 8 and whatever, people are going to be mad. So we now have it as a subscription, which makes sense and sustains it. And at the same time, we offer effectively the one-time purchase because you can buy it and cancel and not resubscribe next year. And you just won't get the updates past your first year of ownership. Cool.
Right.
Maintain it yourself at that point, and you only have to pay that. You don't have to resubscribe. It's kind of the way to do that. Two business models almost. Yeah, that's exciting, man. I'm curious to hear how it goes. Laracast has always offered their $400 lifetime subscription price, and I thought that was cool. So maybe that'll be an experiment for us at Go Rails one time. I know we kind of talked about it last year and just didn't have time to do it before Black Friday, but we thought we might try it, see what it's like. But
yeah, see if it moves the needle.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll see how it
cool.
goes. We did it effectively beginning of the month.
Do you have a window that you were going to experiment with this for, or just plan to just roll with it until you decide it's working or it's not working?
Well, yeah, that one. It's been really good for us so far. And so we'll see how the next couple of months do. But yeah, all signs look good right now. And it's a risk, right?
Yeah. But
it wouldn't be fun if it wasn't.
Right. That's kind of the thing. You don't know what will happen. So worst thing, you can go back to what you were doing before. Best thing, it might end up selling like hotcakes. You just don't know. And it's sort of the worst case scenarios. We just go back to where we were at. You're not taking a life or death risk with it,
right.
I think. Worst case scenario, I'll live in my parents' basement if Go Rails doesn't work out. Or I'll just get a job. I wasn't risking anything that crazy at the time because it was just me and my cat. It didn't really matter that much. It was a good time to take the risk and gamble. So I think you're in that position and it's a good thing to do. And I'm really curious to follow up on this in a few months' time or weeks' time or whatever. Maybe
It'll
tomorrow you're like,
see.
yo, this is working. Have you considered launching it on Product Hunt again and sort of launching it to do some more marketing of, hey, we're a one-time purchase now?
It coincided. We recently did a Product Hunt launch and that
nice.
Coincided with it. Yeah. So
maybe I did see that. Now I'm remembering that.
It wasn't
I think I
explicitly
updated
like
you.
You did. And I appreciate it. It wasn't like an explicit like, hey, we've launched this one-time payment. It's the first time we'd even done a Product Hunt launch. So it just coincided.
That's
together.
right. Yeah, I thought maybe you had before, but that makes sense. That's a good way to test it out and see if just strangers. That's the thing about Product Hunt. It's just random people that are interested in products. They're not job board creators or owners or anything.
Right.
So it's a very kind of useless audience, but also it's a good one because they're entrepreneurs. So maybe they are like a design job board because I'm a designer. Makes a lot of sense.
It's into my,
So
100%.
It's maybe not the most targeted audience you can have, but it is a good one. Same for like to launch Jumpstart or Go Rails on there. They're entrepreneurs. Maybe they want to build a product in Rails or Ruby or whatever, and it kind of fits, but we wouldn't expect a very large percentage of people to convert or whatever. The fun of trying to do marketing.
So glad I have Kyle.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Dude, exciting.
We'll do it again next week.
Yeah. Everybody go do the Rails survey and make sure you submit that giant form.
Try not to make it sound so exciting.
I'm just looking at how many things I've got to answer, but we're going out for my birthday dinner tonight. So I've got to make sure to get it done before then.
Oh, okay. It's the 25th, right?
Yeah. I turn 35. I moved from what are the brackets? 25 to 34 to the 35 to 44 or whatever. Yeah. So I'm moving up age brackets tomorrow, which is interesting, but we've got the pool open. It was very murky. It's still fried. So we're still waiting on them to get a new salt cell installed, I guess, but I'm looking forward to summer. But with all the screaming cicadas out here, it's just kind of baseline level of insanity. So we'll see how the pool actually ends up. If it's relaxing at all, I am questioning it.
Awesome.
All right, man. Well,
enjoy. Chat soon.
yeah. See ya.